Welcome to the MCU Body Count, where we tally up the victims of all our favorite Marvel heroes. I'm Vera Wild, and today we're talking about Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye. The character debuted in Tales of Suspense number 57, which came out in September of 1964. He was created by writer Stan Lee and artist Don Heck, and was originally a reluctant villain. He was a skilled archer who'd fallen in love with Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, who was also a villain at the time, serving as a Soviet operative and primarily going up against Iron Man, with Hawkeye as her backup. Hawkeye would have two more appearances along these lines before changing sides and joining up with the heroes in Avengers number 16 in May of 1965. Since then, he has been a fixture of the team, only occasionally getting to be the lead in various limited series. Clint's skill with a bow came from his time with the traveling carnival that he joined after fleeing the orphanage he was living in. That's right, he literally ran away and joined the circus. While there, he trained under the supervillain Trickshot as well as the Swordsman, who's been both a villain and a hero at various points in the comics and appears as more or less a good guy in the Hawkeye streaming series. But we're not really here to talk about the comics, so we'll move on from that because we're here to talk about his run in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as portrayed by Jeremy Renner. As in the comics, Clint's signature weapon is a bow and arrow, making use of both traditional metal-tipped arrows and also various trick arrows that do, all manner of things. Some deadly, some not. So we'll have to see how this shakes out when they're actually put to use. So, let's get to it. Hawkeye's first on-screen appearance is in Thor, but not only are there no kills for him in this, I won't actually be counting it as a significant appearance at all when it comes time to do the final numbers. It's just one scene, it's effectively an Easter egg. I wouldn't count it for the same reason that I didn't count Tony Stark's one scene appearance in The Incredible Hulk back when I did the Iron Man body count video. So, his first appearance, we are moving right on from. This means we jump over to the Avengers, where Clint has his will bent to serve Loki and does some notable damage in that state. Now, some may argue that these kills shouldn't be counted since Hawkeye's basically under mind control. I am still going to count them though, because as depicted, Loki's mind control doesn't completely override the personality or behaviors of the people under his thrall. It just redirects those things to be in service of him. If it was a complete body puppeting situation, I might not count it, but that is not what's going on here. Barton is still choosing how he goes about his service to Loki, so far as I can tell, and how he operates here is in line with what we see when he is in his right mind. So with all that established, Clint takes out two guards with arrows while Loki is making his big splashy debut in Berlin. Later on, while assaulting the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, Hawkeye takes out a couple of agents with explosions. They would actually technically be his co-workers under normal conditions, so I'm sure that made the next company picnic a little bit awkward. Once free of mind control, Hawkeye takes up a position to help battle the Chitauri invasion. However, as I've established in previous entries, I'm only counting sentient beings as kills, and I consider the Chitauri to be a hive mind, so none of these kills will be counted. If you don't agree with this approach, I went into full detail of my rationale for this back in the Iron Man body count video, so feel free to check that out if you feel inclined to argue. That means that Hawkeye adds nothing to his tally during the fabled Battle of New York, and we now move on to the next team-up movie. Avengers Age of Ultron. Oh, wow, this opening action scene is still a huge pain in my butt. Hawkeye is a little easier than some of the others to track just because of the nature of his weapon. If we see an arrow connect with a non-named villain, otherwise referred to as a henchman, a lackey, or a goon, it's a safe assumption that it's a fatal hit, unless we see that person either get back up or the arrow clearly definitively hits somewhere non-lethal, like, I don't know, pinning their hand to a wall or something. So with all that covered, even though Hawkeye appears to almost never miss most of the time, I am not going to count every single time he looses an arrow as a kill. I need to be able to see that it actually hits somebody and whether or not there is a clear impact or at least somebody dropping from what I can safely assume to be an arrow hit. If I can't come up with those things, it does not count. So while I have little doubt Hawkeye took out more than his fair share and more than I'm going to count during this expanded opening shot, the ones I can confirm for sure only come out to 4. While riding in the back of the Jeep, there are 3 kills, one being a direct hit and 2 more that I am going to count because we see these guys on jetpacks drop out of the air from the points where Clint was aiming his arrows. So I feel that's a safe assumption. I almost counted this hit to the helmet as a kill, but it's accompanied by an electrical sound effect, which in the auditory language of these kinds of films generally denotes a stun. Hawkeye also probably took out the driver of this other Jeep, but I can't rule out the possibility that he shot the engine or did something else to disable the vehicle without actually killing the driver, so that doesn't get counted either. Later on, before the big hero shot, he fires multiple arrows, but frankly, it's all too chaotic and there's too much stuff that gets in the way of the camera for me to be able to tell what's going on for most of these. Going frame by frame, there is one goon who goes down that I'm pretty confident Clint is responsible for, though in reality, it's probably a lot higher than that. Once he's out of the Jeep, Hawkeye has Black Widow's back by taking out this guy from the trees, and then Barton blows up this bunker and the laser cannon housed there. While I don't doubt any Hydra agents inside are indeed killed, I do have to guess on how many that would be. Now, the bunker's big enough I could believe 4, even 6, but the only number I'm comfortable with having any certainty on is 2, since later in the assault, we see similar cannons manned by 2 henchmen. Since Hawkeye then gets knocked around by Quicksilver, that marks the end of his confirmed kills in this opening scene.
You didn't see that coming?
That brings us to the fight on the tanker about midway through the film. And just like before, as much as I'd like to give Hawkeye credit for every arrow fired, I'm only counting the ones where I see an impact or a body. So that gives us 1 when Claw's goons join the fight. We also get another confirmed takedown a little bit later in the same fight, and Clint also fires what I think is a sonic arrow to take out a cluster of lackeys, but I'm presuming that as a knockout move, so he doesn't get credit for any of them. Since the Ultron bots are definitely a hive mind, it's even more clear-cut than the Chitauri, none of the last action scene counts. Hawkeye next appears in Civil War, as do most of the established MCU characters at this point, but since he's only participating in hero-on-hero battles, there are no kills to be counted. Moving on.
We're still friends, right?
Depends on how hard you hit me.
You were pulling your punches.
Hawkeye was in absentia for Infinity War, but he comes back with a sword and a mean streak in Endgame. When the film cuts to Tokyo, we come into an action scene already in progress with, by my count, 9 bodies on the floor. With Barton working alone, I'm actually okay with crediting him with every single one of these. 3 more get taken down with some sort of thrown sharp thing. There's another slashed as Clint goes up the stairs. I am not counting the guy who gets knocked out the window because I don't hear any sound effects that sound like a slash or a stab. Just the backhand out the window, and it was only 1 flight of stairs up, so I figure that's a survivable fall. He may have landed on something that might have killed him, but we don't see that, so not going to count it. We then have Clint's showdown sword fight, where he ultimately claims another kill with a gut slash, a throat slash, and a sword plunge for good measure. Good grief, Clint. While Hawkeye, going by Ronin at this particular point in his life, does rack up quite the body count at the start of the film, that's going to be it for him, since during the big climactic fight scene, pretty much anything he takes out is part of Thanos' army, which is bulked out with various mindless beasts and hive minds like the Chitauri. So that's it for Endgame. Now, covering Hawkeye, we've also got something new to add to the body count, a 6-episode limited mini-series, and that show follows Clint as he meets Archer Kate Bishop. The two become embroiled in crime shenanigans, and in the first episode, Hawkeye takes out some members of the so-called tracksuit mafia, but it's a fist fight and it appears to be non-fatal for all involved. Second episode involves some Molotov cocktail throwing, but again, nobody gets killed. Episode 3 gives us a flashback from the perspective of Maya Lopez, aka Echo, and we see Clint, in the persona of Ronin, kill several members of the Tracksuit Mafia, including Echo's father. In the flashback, Echo returns to the Fat Man Auto Repair Shop, and we get our first kill with the man's face pressed to a small window and the sound of a sword. Next up, we get a blood splatter coming across the window from one unseen source, and then we briefly see another man get cut down. So that's 2 more, since they're spaced far enough apart, both temporally and the distance that the first blood splatter had to be from somebody other than the man we then see sliced. We promptly get 2 more, seeing Ronan stab at someone just out of frame before stabbing backwards to get another guy. Maya then enters the office, where we see another body slashed across the throat, and then her father run through before Ronan bolts. That covers the flashback, and we get to jump to the present. Clint and Kate escape the tracksuit mafia, and for the most part, Clint seems to be going for non-lethal options here. That is, until he shoots this guy in the back and then another in the throat. Clint goes hand to hand for a bit before taking down 2 more by arrow and then disarming this guy with a little bit of a show-off move. But I like it. Now, we do see that plenty of people are left alive as Clint and Kate exit, but none of them have arrows sticking out of their bodies. My point in bringing this up is that there's no movement from the people who took any of the shots that I listed. So I am going to count all of those as kills, even though we see plenty of people were still left behind. Now, it's car chase time, and there are definitely some fatalities here, but with Clint at the wheel and Kate firing the arrows, Hawkeye does not get credit for these. Episode 4 features some very cool, if underlit, fights with both Maya and Yelena, the sister of the late Black Widow. But since those are named characters who are going to be used in later projects going up against the 2 leads, and this isn't the finale, no prizes for realizing none of these characters are going to get killed. Episode 5 features Clint back in the Ronin costume, taking out goons, but none of them are clearly or definitively killed. Actually, the whole segment in the parking lot is very Batman Begins, up until Clint takes on Maya. A decently matched fight, but no clear kills there either, so let's get to the finale. The Hawkeye finale also has some good action, including an incredibly, awesomely entertaining fight between Yelena and Kate. But since we're focused on Clint here, I can't linger on that too long as much as I like it.
That was a good one. That was good form. But you did the really cool body throw.
Yeah, they stop making me like you.
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Clint has it out with Maya's traitorous second in command, and that results initially in just a knockdown. Now, during this fight, he also brings down the ceiling on a group of goons, but none of them are taken down by the blast itself. And while blunt force trauma to the head is no joke, that blast didn't bring down the floor above that ceiling, so I'm disinclined to think that what they got hit with was weighty enough to truly be fatal. After that, Clint actually ends up stuck in the iconic Rockefeller Center tree, which Kate eventually brings down so we can rejoin the fight as more of the tracksuit mafia closes in. This is a lot of trick arrows, so I'm gonna have to make some judgment calls on what's liable to result in death. But on review, most of the ones I'm inclined to count as deadly get fired by Kate, and therefore, they don't go on the count. You know, if I had been keeping track, I would be kind of curious to know if she actually kills more people than Hawkeye does in this show. Now, I'm not going to go back and check. I actually don't really have the time. But if anybody else wants to check and let me know, that'd be cool. As for Clint, he does a freezing arrow to this guy's leg, and had the effect of that climbed up past his upper thigh, I might count this one, but as depicted, while I expect he's probably going to lose that leg, I'm not going to count it as a kill. Next, there's this stun arrow, which, yeah, it stuns, so that's not a death. There's also a gas arrow, which appears to be more of a distraction or possibly a knockout move. It's hard to be sure because the camera doesn't linger on it, so we don't really know the effects of this thing. Then things go hand to hand for a bit. We hit the slow motion triumphant moment of this brawl, and we finally get a kill for Clint in the finale of his own dang show as he takes down a goon with a normal arrow right in the chest. It is possible there's some more kills during this section, but we don't see the impact and effect of every arrow that gets fired. And again, I'm only counting what I can be certain of. For instance, I think he's the one who fires this, maybe it's a sonic, maybe it's a concussion arrow, I don't know, but I can't be certain of that. Besides, it doesn't really look deadly to me. However, he does have this show-offy no aiming shot that causes a pretty sizable explosion, and while none of the tracksuit mafia guys are engulfed by the blast, I'm still going to call that close enough to be fatal, so that adds 3 more to the count. Next, when Maya's second-in-command shows up again with 2 henchmen in tow,
Clint fires off 2 arrows in a row, using the second one to split the first and take out the 2 goons.
Clint himself also survives a rather thorough beating from Yelena and is able to make it home for Christmas, wrapping up this series and his time in the MCU. For now, at least. It's possible he may return, but the show also seems to set up the possibility of him retiring and for Kate Bishop to take up his bow, possibly even his mantle in future. But only time will tell, so we'll wrap up this count with a nice Christmas bow. Let's take a look at how it all shook out and run down the numbers. By my count, Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, aka Ronin, aka Arrow Guy, ended up with a total of 44 on-screen kills. He doubtlessly took out way more in his time as Ronin, but again, I'm only counting what we see on screen. Now this puts him above Captain America's, but still well behind the current leader, Iron Man, who racked up an impressive 82. Appearing in 5 films and a 6-episode series, if I count the series as a super long film, that gives Clint an average of 7.33 kills per appearance. Counting it this way puts him between Steve and Tony for kill average. Although if I count each episode as an appearance instead of just the series as a single one, that would give Clint an average body count of 4 per appearance, and that would make him the lowest average of the group so far, since counting it that way means he has the most appearances to spread his kills out over. For my purposes, I'm going to consider the series as 1 appearance, but I thought folks might like to know how it looked the other way. As far as how Hawkeye took people out, it doesn't quite end up the way you might be expecting. There were 7 people taken down by various forms of explosion, including explosive arrows, 16 taken out by more or less traditional arrows, and a whopping 21 cut down with a sword. That means Ronin was such a prolific killer that Clint actually took out more people with the sword than with his character's iconic weapon. Most of his non-explosive trick arrows appear to be non-lethal, which is part of why that number is lower than even I was expecting. So there we have it. 1 more Avengers legacy of death accounted for. Hawkeye was an interesting one to cover since his go-to weapon is probably the most lethal by nature, and he spent some time as a flat-out murderous vigilante using something even deadlier. Clint clearly needed his family to keep him grounded, and when they were gone, he went on a rampage with an extremely harsh sense of justice, but once his family was back, he was able to regain his life as a family man. Even though his actions as Ronin still haunted him, as seen in the Hawkeye series. But with Kate ready and eager to take his place, it may finally be time for him to settle into a quiet life. That's it for this MCU body count. In 2 months, it's going to be a special time. It's going to be smashing time, as we take a look at the damage and bodies left behind by Bruce Banner, aka the Incredible Hulk. Hope to see you then.
Puny God.
So that's Hawkeye. What did you think about this one? Was it higher than you thought? Lower? Did it break down the way you expected? Whatever your thoughts might be, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills and enables me to sink the not inconsiderable amount of time it takes to make this series, even though it doesn't get particularly high views. I'm gonna finish out this initial run covering the 6 original Avengers. I'm gonna do it because I want to, but I couldn't do more passion projects like this without that support. Even if you can't support me that way, like, share, subscribe also help. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. End credits, that means I need to shout out my top Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zupin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Renabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shay Legurle, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you so much for your support. You can get your name in the credits too by checking out the rewards on the Patreon. You only tried to eat my earring once this time. That's much better.